Alright, so it's time for my top albums of the year. We're doing 15 this year because there were a ton of really good albums. And I originally wanted my top songs of the year to come out before my top albums, but I kind of rambled on for like 2 hours and 36 minutes, I think it was. So yeah, I'm gonna have to edit that a little bit longer. And I'll try and keep this as short as I can. Alright, and number 15 is The Nothing That Is by Fit for an Autopsy. This was the first time I've ever listened to Fit for an Autopsy. I've heard of them for a while, but I never actually listened to any of their music, and this was a fantastic album. The instrumentation is on another level, and the vocals really kind of remind me of Era's vocalist JT, so that's always really cool. Start to finish, this is just an insanely solid album, man. Going into it, never hearing Fit for an Autopsy before, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and this was a very pleasant surprise. It was really, really good. At number 14, I'm putting You Won't Go Before You're Supposed To by Knocked Loose. I think this is going to be a lot higher on a lot of other people's lists. I really fuck with this album, but it is very short, and I just haven't come back to it super often, you know what I mean? At least compared to a lot of these other albums on the list. This is definitely one of those albums that you want to listen to start to finish. I don't really listen to any like individual tracks off of this album. If I'm gonna listen to it, I listen to it in full. But yeah, Knocked Loose killed it this year. They're one of the biggest bands of the year. Between the album and the Jimmy Kimmel performance, like, they absolutely killed it this year. This album flows beautifully. It is so cool. There's tons of like variety throughout the album, lots of atmosphere. The lyrics are really good. I mean, this album is great. It's a little surprising it's not higher up on my list, honestly. So yeah, it's definitely a big highlight, big standout album of the year. Okay, next at number 13, we have A Piece of Me I Never Let You Find by Kane Hill. This is also a band I've never heard of until this year, and this album really blew me away. The production alone is incredible, but the vocals, man, this album really surprised me. I love all the elements on this album. There's tons of invent animate in this, but it also reminds me of a couple other bands. The instrumentals, the really heavy parts of this album are insane, but the atmospheric, soft, melodic parts are really what pulls me in here. The melodies just get stuck in my head all the time. The vocals are incredible. There's a lot of like invent animate, Marcus Vick kind of things going on with some of the softer vocals. And I know it's a little bit weird, but on Drowning Therapy and a couple other spots on the album, he really sounds like Dan Reynolds from Imagine Dragons. But I think it works really well. But if you're a little bit new to like metalcore, like modern metal, but you like melodies and good production and atmosphere and stuff, you will really like this album. Okay, at number 12, we have Diamond Construct with their album Angel Killer Zero. This is another band that I discovered this year, and this is kind of the big like From Joy album of the year, because From Joy didn't release an album this year. So this kind of took its place, you know what I mean? There's a lot of similar sounds going on between the two bands, but the amount of variety on this album and like the amount of genres that they like tap into is insane. But the first 6 songs alone are enough to like put this album in the top of the year for me. Jinx and Faded are my favorite, but Neon is a banger, and Zodiac Memories goes super hard and has a really beautiful synth-filled outro. This album goes from super energetic, distorted, filthy heaviness to like super vibey. Okay, at number 11, I have Broken Home by Traveler. I didn't hear this album until more recently. It came out in late November, I think the 22nd, so it's a very new album. But holy shit, did this album like take over my life, man. This is such a solid album. Currents didn't release an album this year, but Traveler did, you know what I mean? Like this, if you're a Currents fan, you gotta hear this album. It starts off with Homewrecker, which is one of my top songs of the year, not to spoil my list or anything, but it really reminds me of like Apnea by Currents. It has that darkness, that anger, the heartbreak coming out as anger like Currents has on The Place I Feel Safest, mixing with Architects like Naysayer. It's very similar to Naysayer actually. So already that is an insane opener, and then Love Lost is the first song that I heard from them. It was recommended to me through Spotify, and that song, man, absolutely incredible. If you like progressive metalcore, really heavy stuff like that, but with tons of emotion in it, like really emo, with tons of like synthy atmosphere and stuff, this is definitely for you. And yeah, I had never heard of this band before. I heard only 2 other songs before checking this whole album out, and they were like way more emo and a lot less heavy, a lot less distorted. So I don't know if this is a new sound for them, but dude, I absolutely love it, and I cannot wait to hear more from Traveler. All right, number 10, we have like Moths to Flames with Cycles of Trying to cope. First off, this is one of the best album arts of the year. I love the artwork. But yeah, this was my first ever like Moths to Flames album. I've heard like a song or two from them, and I really love this album, start to finish. It is so cool. The guitar work, the drums are out of this world. I love the vocals. It's super heavy, but there's a lot of like catchy moments on like choruses, like The Depths I Roam, which is probably my favorite off of this album, besides for Over the Garden Wall, of course. I also really loved the single they came out with called Soul Exchange. I'm not sure if that was just a B-side that didn't make the album or what that song was, but all I know is I really liked it, and I definitely got to check out more from this band, man. Okay, number 9 already, we got Coup de Grace by Space Cowboy. And this is another band that I've never listened to until this year, and this album absolutely blew me away. I love the features from Iris. That really makes this album like up on a whole other level. This is easily one of the most immersive albums of the year, man. From the lyrics to the really unique vocal performance, it's very similar to like Static Dress, but with a lot of like old emo influence as well. The choruses are fantastic. The screaming is so good. Like when it gets really heavy, like in Chewing the Scenery, it is super good. This is definitely something that you gotta listen to start to finish, with those interludes with Iris, filled with like a jazzy vibe. Like a 1950s noir thing going on, which I absolutely love. Okay, at number 8 we have Introsphere by Gravemind. So going into this album, I had only heard Gravemind's older stuff, like 2019 and even older than that. I hadn't listened to this band for quite a long time, so the change up in their sound was insane to listen to. The features are also stacked, dude. We got Reba Myers, Mick Gordon, and Jamie Hales from Polaris. That is crazy. But the thing that really fucked me up on this album, man, was on the third song, House of Cards, when that insanely produced, like, I don't know, laser sound comes in. That from then on, the album absolutely had me hooked. Like, Death Touch might be the best song on this album, not gonna lie, but House of Cards blew me away with the production. Alloy is one of my favorite songs of the year, and Pranic Lift is such a powerful song. I mean, it's so dark. From the heaviness to the emotion and the atmosphere of this album, I mean, it's one of the best releases of the year, easily, and I wasn't expecting it to be. Okay, number 7, this one's a little bit sad. It is What I'll Leave Behind by Void of Vision. This is, I don't think anyone expected this to be their last album. I thought they were just starting, I'm not gonna lie. I thought they were just now, like, starting to build some crazy momentum, and that they would be around for a lot longer, but they decided to stop the band. But this is a really good album to leave off on, I think. Angel of Darkness is such a beautiful song. It was in my top songs of last year. I do wish this album was longer. It's only 29 minutes, 10 songs, but this album is packed with variety and a lot of different sounds. Just the difference between like Blood for Blood and Supernova is insane. Gamma Knife to Angel of Darkness, you know what I mean? There's dancier songs like Decades, Industrial Anthem like Neurotic. Like, each song has its own place, you know what I mean? I still think Chronicles is like their magnum opus, but yeah, this album was fantastic, and I loved seeing them live. I saw them live twice, so yeah, I'm very glad I was able to catch them live when they were a band, and I hope Jack continues to do vocals, because he's one of my favorites. Alright, at number 6 we have People Watching by 156 Silence. This is another band that I had never heard of before this year. This year Abs just introduced me to some of the best bands I've ever heard. This is one of those albums that sticks with you for a while after you listen to it. I mean, there's catchy parts to this album, of course. There's some insane choruses like on Better Written Villain and Once I Need that are just like ingrained into your soul, you know what I mean? But the heaviness and the uneasiness, like, I mean, this is a haunting album. I mean, there are some dark, menacing vibes on this album, and the vocals are really brutal. Some of my favorite screams of this of the whole year, just agonizing screams that just don't stop. They just like pummel you into a little fucking thing, I don't even know. But yeah, this album just came out of nowhere, and it is very unique, and it is definitely a really big standout album of the year. Okay, at number 5 we have Negative Spaces by Poppy. I am extremely surprised that this is at number 5. I really enjoyed the singles, but hearing the full album, it was so much better than I thought it was going to be. And I didn't think it was going to be bad or even mid. I thought this was going to be a good album, but it blew my expectations out of the water. This album flows perfectly. I love the production. Jordan Fish is insane. There's so much variety on this album. There's a song for everyone, really. I absolutely absolutely loved all the interludes and everything. I mean, this album start to finish is absolutely incredible. I love her voice. I love the heaviness. Honestly, I like the more melodic, like crystallized songs like Vital and Halo as well are some of my favorite of the year. We got a ton of like early 2000s vibes with songs like Negative Spaces. And the most standout song on this album is probably Surviving on Defiance. I love that song. It is gorgeous, and it really reminds me of Ember Glow by Invent Animate. So yeah, I adore this album, and I'm even a bigger Poppy fan now because I hadn't really listened to her music at all, but I liked her back in like 2015-16 when she started her YouTube channel. So I've heard of her forever, and yeah, I hope she goes in this direction with her next album as well. I absolutely love this, everything about it. Alright, at number 4 we have From the New World by Alt. This album is the definition of Thal. I mean, the atmosphere, the production, the guitar tone, the vocals. I mean, it's 10 out of 10 vocals easily. This album was like life-changing when I heard it. Like, I mean, this is the most atmospheric Thal album I've ever heard, maybe, and that's saying a lot because Thal is all about atmosphere. Besides for Viljarta, of course, they're the kings. But holy fuck, something about mixing Thal with metalcore is just so good. This album flows amazingly as well. Each song kind of has its own place, showing off a different side of the band. It is just an unreal album. Listening to the singles, it didn't grip me as much, but listening to this full album, man, it was just, I was ascending, dude. Literally levitating above my chair, man. My favorite songs are definitely Echoes and Cycles, but I will give a shout out to Memory of Light. I think that's a very underrated song on the album. And Ephemeral, because it was my least favorite the first time I listened to this album. But the more I listen to it, Ephemeral is an absolute masterpiece. So I take back the ephemeral slander that I spewed. I didn't even say anything bad about it. I just it was just my least favorite probably on the first listen, but oh my god, the guitar is just insane on that track. Okay, at number 3 we have Starfire by Darko Us. This is hands down Darko's best album. I loved their self-titled. That was my absolute favorite, and no, Starfire just blew everything away and is an absolute masterpiece. I mean, this album is so cool, and I know this band isn't for everybody, you know what I mean? They definitely sound like just chaos, like actual fucking like hell. But this album also has some of their most like gorgeous and beautiful, atmospheric, synth-filled, vibey songs as well, and like outros, like interludes and stuff on the songs. 5D is a great example, and so is the second half, like middle section of Bunny Suit. Even Atomic Origin has some insane vibes on it, you know what I mean? There's just something very nostalgic to me about a lot of the sounds throughout this album as well. Lots of like Y2K, early 2010s. So there's a lot of like melodic, dreamy stuff that I absolutely love, but the rest of this album is just brutal, man. And for how long it is, it just flows so well, and it's definitely probably the most experimental album of the year. I mean, I can't even imagine what it's like making this. Like, there's so many elements coming together. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's genuinely fucking hard to comprehend at times. Okay, number 2, we have Death is Little More by Boundaries. This was my number 1 for the majority of the year, but I did a lot of re-listening the last couple months, and it is my number 2 spot, I think. Even though it technically maybe should be my number 1, but yeah, my number 2 spot. This album is a complete masterpiece. It's dark, it's heavy, it's beautiful, it's emotional. I mean, the lyrics really got me, man. I mean, there's so much emotion in this album. It is insane. But this is easily my favorite band I found all year. I fell in love with this band. I checked out a ton of their albums. Bearing Brightness is on the same level as this, maybe. In terms of like emotion and how much I love the lyrics, it definitely is, but this album has the heaviness, the distorted just darkness. It's nasty. So this is probably their best album, but I absolutely love Bearing Brightness as well. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite, man, between Easily Erased, A Pale Light Lingers, and Blame's Burden, but it's probably going to go to A Pale Light Lingers. That's one of my most listened to songs of the year easily. Before I get to my number 1 spot, I do have 3 albums I'd like to shout out. I wanted to give a shout out to In Heart's Wake, Incarnation. This is the first album I ever heard by In Heart's Wake, and I was very impressed with it. There's a lot of really catchy, heavy moments on it, but that last song, man, Transmission, one of my favorite songs of the year. I absolutely fell in love with that song. And yeah, this is just a really solid album, man. My next shout out is Make Them Suffer with their self-titled album. I think the only reason this didn't get on the list is that there's a lot of like similar song structures throughout the album, and we did hear like over half of this album as singles, which made the release of the full album a little bit underwhelming, but there are songs on here that I just love, like No Hard Feelings, which might be my favorite song on the whole album, not gonna lie. I love the vocals, this album sounds just incredible, and yeah, No Hard Feelings, man, that song took over my life, dude. The celestial atmosphere, I mean, it is just, talk about levitating out of your chair. The dreamy flow this song has just makes you feel like you're floating, man. But yeah, this album is super, super solid. My last shout out is for Ocean Grove with their album Oddworld. I just recently listened to this and I absolutely loved it. It's a nostalgia fest. It is straight out of the 90s, early 2000s, but with a very, very modern production. It sounds really good. Tons of like Linkin Park and Deftones influences with this. It's got the heaviness, it's got the rap, it's got the nostalgia with songs like Raindrop. It's definitely one of my favorite albums I've heard this year. And yeah, we're ready for my number one. There were plenty of other very surprising albums that came out, like Billie Eilish's album, that I would love to talk about, but yeah, I'm restraining myself for this video, of course. But anyway, enough ranting, let's get into my number one pick. And my number one goes to Bring Me the Horizon, Posthuman Next Gen. This was at my number 2 or 3 all year, but re-listening to it with like headphones and just really listening to it over and over, this album is an absolute masterpiece, and I think it's probably their best album since Sempiternal. And that's coming from someone that absolutely loves That's the Spirit. I'm a huge fan of That's the Spirit. I still think that's like their most mature album, but I think this destroys Ammo, and I think that it is better than Posthuman Survival Horror for sure. This album has the best production I've heard all 2024. The production is absolutely mind-blowing. Just all the little like ADHD sounds and stuff. It is super impressive. This album is such a vibe, and for it taking like 4 years to make, basically, it flows together so well. And there are just some incredible songs on here, man. Utopia means a lot to me. I absolutely love that song. It's such a great way to open up the album. Top 10 Statues also is a gorgeous song. Probably shows off the production best out of any of the tracks on here. Limousine with Aurora. I still gotta check out Aurora. I see clips of her and stuff. She seems really sweet and very, very talented. Lots of Linkin Park kind of stuff going on here, but it's a lot less like obvious. And Posthuman Survival Horror had that, but it was super obvious. Like, you could name the Linkin Park song that they got inspired by, you know what I mean? A Bullet with My Name On featuring Under Oath is like their most like traditional metalcore song since Sempiternal. There's an insane amount of variety on this album. The quality is all super high. It all flows together. There's a lot of hidden little messages and things throughout this album. I understand that a lot of these songs were released as singles, and it took so long for them to come out with this album that we already knew a lot of these songs really, really well for years. But if you like, just for a second in your mind, pretend that you've never heard any of these songs before, this is easily album of the year. I mean, holy fuck, Amen alone. Now, my favorite album from them is There Is a Hell. Sempiternal's obviously right there with it. Objectively, Sempiternal is better than There Is a Hell. I just love There Is a Hell so much. But I think you could make an argument that this is their best album. I think you could. There's tons of heaviness on here. Ollie's vocals are probably the best he's ever sounded. I'm not saying this is their best album at all. I don't think it is, but you definitely have an argument there. You know what I mean? I think this is their best album in like 10 years. And again, that's coming from someone. I have Ammo on vinyl signed. I have a signed copy of Ammo. I really liked Ammo. You know what I mean? I really liked everything that this band has ever done. Now, I don't think this is actually their best album, at least personally for me, but objectively, I feel like if you've never heard Bring Me the Horizon before, I'm pretty sure you would probably say this is objectively their best album. And again, that's coming from someone that There Is a Hell is my favorite album. I've listened to all their music almost equally, I think, and I think this is like an absolute masterpiece that combines a lot of their past sounds with brand new sounds that I've never heard in my entire life. They've absolutely perfected the sound that they were trying to go for on Ammo, perfected the sound they were going for on the first Posthuman album. This album is incredibly immersive. There's so many little tiny details that you can listen to that you pick different things up every time you listen through this album. And yeah, man, there's my top albums of the year. I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely let me know what you thought down below, and give me your top 10 albums, top 5 albums, whatever you want to do. Making this list as well as my top songs of the year was really hard for me, a lot harder than I thought it would be. Last year it wasn't nearly as difficult. There was just so much good music this year, and next year's already really stacked. So yeah, it's gonna be really fun. Definitely subscribe if you're interested in future videos, because next year again is already looking insane for music. And yeah, I'll see you guys down in the comments section. Take it easy.